All righty, Lev Parnas back on Mea Culpa. How are you, my brother? So much going on. So much going on. We're going to jump right into it. Hour goes by way too quickly. So, Lev, look, you and I, we both know Trump never makes a move unless it somehow benefits him, literally personally. All right, so let's be honest. What's Trump really getting out of prolonging this war between Iran and Israel?
Well, he's trying to get several things out of it. I called him Donnie two. Did you see that one? I call him Donnie 2 weeks now. That's Donnie 2 weeks because everything is 2 weeks. But it's interesting. It's a great question, but it's very strategical because behind the scenes, what nobody's talking about, the media, none of them, and that's why it's like a far fetched somewhere hidden in this in the woven weaves, but. Steve Witkoff is the guy, remember, that's connected to both the Middle East and he's also connected. He's the one that's speaking to the Iranians. He's also the one speaking with the Russians. Okay. Vladimir Putin and Trump said out the truth out loud by accident. I don't think he meant it, but you know better than anybody how Trump just talks. Sometimes he just doesn't stop and talks. What he said, he speaks to Putin all the time, and Putin wants to be the mediator to negotiate, to do something. And he even made a comment: negotiate, try to figure out Ukraine first before you get it here. So Putin is playing a very interesting game here because he doesn't care about Iran. Iran for him is a tool. Iran is a proxy for all the terroristic stuff that he does around the world. That he uses Iran and their proxies like Hamas and other, stuff like that. Iran helps him with shadow oil fleets that he's using to go around sanctions to be able to fund his wars. Iran helps with the Shihad missiles that he bombs into Ukraine all the time. So, but what's interesting is Iran is also a sacrificial lamb for him because he knows Donald Trump needs a win. Donald Trump needs optics. He wants a win. He wants to come in there, and basically say, I got some kind of peace deal done, or I stopped the war, and I got rid of the nuclear programs. That's what Donald Trump wants. If Donald Trump could come in and say he destroyed the nuclear weapons in Iran without losing any soldiers, without going to war, and he would basically appease his base and appease what majority of the world and our country, if you take a look, majority of the country doesn't want
I would
Iran.
be, I would be, I would be 100% in favor of it.
Exactly. So that's what Donald Trump wants. And what Putin is trying to give him by playing a game is very interesting because Putin is saying to him, okay, I'm going to allow you. This is what we spoke about earlier on our Substack Live about the last conversation they had between Putin and Trump when Ukraine hit Russia very hard inside. That was when I said my sources told me that they had that type of, I'll give you the Middle East, you give me Ukraine, and we seen what was going on in Ukraine with the bombardment, with Putin attacking, and so on and so on. Putin needs something to happen, what a lot of people are not talking about, that is extremely important to him, is he needs the oil prices to go up. Because right now Putin's economy in Russia is they're almost done. He's leveraged to the gill. The war is crushing him. There's the sanctions are crushing him, and so he needs it. And if the oil prices don't go up, Russia could be and is in a lot of trouble. If right now what happens and I think the next steps that we're going to see happen is terroristic attacks in the Straits of Hormuz where all the oil are going in or bombing or fires or for oil facilities all over Iran going up. That's going to jack up the price of oil, which is great for Putin because it brings tremendous money to their war machine and to fund what they're doing. But he also needs to play it very thin because he can't allow to overthrow the regime because he's loyal to the Ayatollah. Because he's part of their game that they play. He's part of their team. So he needs to somehow strategically allow Trump to get his win by getting rid of the nuclear weapons. This is the ideal goal, I'm telling you. I'm not going to say this is what's going to happen, but this is what they're talking about, what they're trying to do. Trump gets the win by he gets peace, nuclear weapons are gone. He
So, well, I'm so
satisfies.
sorry, Lev, for my
Yeah,
listeners, are
yeah.
you actually saying that you think, and it's a wild assertion, and holy crap, I mean, if that comes true, we are going to change your name from Lev to Nostradamus. Are you saying that Trump will somehow allow Russia to advance and take over Ukraine by probably stopping all funding of munitions? And the exchange is going to be that Israel and Iran come to an agreement, a deal, as Trump likes to put it, that will, in essence, be the denuclearization with verifiable proof from the agencies of Iran's nuclear program.
Yep, 100%. And to add to it is Putin is going to allow Trump and Israel to take out these nuclear weapons. He's going to, except for certain facilities, which he made a very interesting comment because Putin likes to throw a wrench into everything because he's a mastermind, strategical manipulator. So he was asked about, listen, and his Q&A he was doing in Russia, and they were saying to him, you're supporting you have deals and you have agreements with Iran. Are you going to allow them just to go bombard their facilities like that? So Putin said something interesting. He said, well, we are already helping because in one of the main nuclear facilities, I forgot the name of the facility, he goes, we have over 600 Russian scientists that are working there now. Basically, these are psychological sayings. So, you're not going to go hit that nuclear because you're not going to kill 600 Russian scientists, saying that's why Trump is not. Again, Putin's playing the game by showing strength from his side because he's a mastermind manipulator and using Trump and everybody else to do it. But at the end of the game, the interesting part, if you look at it, Michael, and it's crazy to think about it. So you have three people right now. You have Putin, you have Bibi, and you have Trump. All three of them, if they were not presidents or leaders of their country, would be in prison. Putin is a war criminal that can. Bibi was in the middle of a corruption trial that he went away when he won, and Trump is, out of all of them, is actually indicted, convicted criminal, 34 counts convicted criminal. So these are three people that are right now controlling the war in the Middle East, the war in Ukraine and Russia and Eastern Europe, and the war going on here in the United States that Trump, because the thing that we also don't talk about is we literally still, till this day, have troops in LA that are, as Kristi Noem said, are there to liberate
Well,
Los Angeles from.
we're going to certainly get into those LA ICE raids, including what just took place, about a week or so ago, there with at the Dodger Stadium. But I want to ask you this then, because there's been some backroom chatter that Trump's inner circle sees this war as a reset button for his presidency. You believe that they're deliberately, say, fanning the flames to distract from domestic failures?
I think it's a combination. I think you're definitely right where there's a portion of that mega base, portion of that, so that are flaming all kind to constantly distract, and that's part of Trump's MO with everything he does. He throws so much shit out there to distract, to be able to, so you don't know what really is going on. But it's also interesting about the reports that have been coming out, talking about how Trump is only listening to a very small group of people about what's going on in Iran and stuff like that. And one of the names that keeps coming up there isn't it very important because I keep saying these talks, are meant to be able to somehow, again, like I said, all Trump cares about is the optics of getting the win. If he could stop this war and get a win and allow then Putin, because remember, Putin is telling him that he will take over Ukraine as long as Trump cuts off all support and help, and which we've seen that he's done to the point where he's even redirecting missiles that were supposed to be congressionally already approved, that instead of going to Ukraine, he's redirected them to the Middle East. So he's already, playing that game. But the interesting part I was going to say is that the one person that he's not talking to, the two people, I'm sorry, is Tulsi Gabbard and Pete Hegseth.
Pete Hegseth. Yeah.
Pete Hegseth. Because he obviously understands that Pete Hegseth, it shows you that those two are really not in the position, because the media is chasing the story, saying, how could you not be speaking to your national DNI and your national security advisor? These are your people. Well, because they're not really there for that job. He put them in there for for a different purpose, to be able loyalists, just to do what he says. They're not really qualified to serve in that position and to
Well,
be
I
able
think
to
he's
give them
actually
advice.
really looking, Lev. I think he's truly looking for some legitimate answers. And he knows that one, Tulsi Gabbard and national intelligence should never be in the same sentence. And Pete Hegseth and Department of Defense. Again, Pete Hegseth may be a book smart guy, but he doesn't know shit about the Department of Defense. He doesn't get it. Let me put it to you that way. He's not qualified. You're right. It wasn't predicated on meritocracy. It was predicated on being a loyalist.
100%. And I
Yeah.
agree with you. He's starting to slowly start, because remember, don't forget, the one thing that Pete Hegseth did do is he basically gutted all of the hierarchy of people that belonged and were leading our defense and all of that, and put in loyalists into there. So now Trump is starting to listen. That's why if you see some of the names that are in the inner circle, some of them are generals now. But now these generals, you have to keep in mind, are not, and this is where the interesting part, because where the media, they don't remind you that these are not people that were there because they earned their position. And some of them might be great. I'm not going to go into but these are loyalists that were put into after the purge that Pete Hegseth did, getting rid of all of the people in there and putting in loyalists to Trump. So these are the people that are right now around Trump.
So look, you and I both, as I said, we both know Trump. And here's what my assessment is. Tulsi Gabbard made a fatal mistake at an incredibly important time in Trump's presidency. We're talking about a potential nuclear war, right? We're talking about a nuclearized Iran, which every president, at least in our lifetime, have all said the same thing, that Iran must never possess a nuke, let alone they have enough uranium to produce 10. That was her big mistake, opening up her mouth and saying things that contradict the president, or saying things that the president then ultimately had to contradict. Pete Hegseth is also a guy that has made multiple blunders, from his Signal Gate 1, Signal Gate 2, and a couple of other serious mistakes. Again, Trump right now, his presidency needs a reset. It needs a desperate reset, and they may actually be doing that. They may be looking to use this as an opportunity, and these two dopes are actually fucking that up. Now, let me ask you this. Let me ask you further, because you were once very deep in the Trump orbit. You see any fingerprints of, say, Stephen Miller on this Iran policy? Who do you think is really pulling? Who do you think is really pulling the strings here? Or maybe it's Bibi Netanyahu.
Well, I'll tell you, it's a combination. It's a combination. I think, first of all, I think him and Netanyahu have there have been conversations, and right after, remember who was the first person to came to the White House, to the Oval, was Netanyahu, and I think that everything was already set in stone, except for the little thing that happened in the middle, was the Russia-Ukraine conversations and Tulsi, and that's why the 60 days came in, and we spoke about that. But I talk about all the time, and you're 100% right, Michael, that it's that the real person behind Donald Trump, who's doing these policies, is Stephen Miller, who is also now, I'm hearing that another big source voice in there is Susie Wiles. Susie Wiles, Stephen Miller, and the what's his name, John Vogt, the originator of the Project
Russell,
2025.
Russell.
Russell Vogt. I'm sorry, Russell Vogt. Thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you, Russell Vogt. You got all these names spinning in the head. So these are the people that are running the policy. Stephen Miller and Russell Vogt are implementing their policies that go back to 2000, all the way back to their ideology. And now you have Susie Wiles, that's part of that group that is implementing and pushing it through the proper places, being Trump's
Chief of staff.
mouthpiece. Yeah,
Yeah.
mouthpiece. Yeah, yeah.
Interesting. So let me ask you this, because I want to go back to that whole concept. It's fascinating to me. And if it, like I said, if it comes true, holy crap, what a prediction. Because again, you've got some pretty significant ties and insight into the region, into Ukraine and Russia. You believe that Trump is quietly aiding Putin's objectives in Ukraine while publicly pretending to be hands off?
I mean, I think, even though he tries to be publicly hands off and tries to make that impression, I think they've shown the world, they've played their cards that he's openly aiding Russia. I mean, it's without doubt. I mean, all the European nations, allies have come out and commented and said that. And that's why you even see things happening in the world where they're trying to somehow appease Trump for him to be a little bit nicer to Ukraine. Because, I mean, till this day, he still blames Ukraine for somehow starting this war. He still blames Ukraine for the war continuing. So, I think that's the whole thing, Michael. People got to start calling things like they're like me and you do and not be worried about saying what it is. They are, right now, Trump is helping Russia. He stopped aid to Ukraine completely. B, he's diverting missiles and that already were approved by the Biden administration over to the Middle East. He's basically put NATO into a tailspin. He's told all our European allies that it's, go screw yourself, go, you're the ones who have to deal with it, with Putin and Trump. He constantly, just even literally at this summit, the G7, he was there not talking about how to deal with Putin and peace with Ukraine, but talking about how Putin and Russia should become part of the G8, that it's a mistake, But I'm sorry we could break this actually on here on the Midas Touch Mea Culpa with Michael. I have a source. It's not 100% yet. But it's falling into place and everything. Me and you have been talking about Trump. Something's, maybe health-wise and everything. But some of my Ukrainian sources tell me from some of the people that were in the G7 saying that Trump is definitely something's not well health-wise because there's a smell coming from it. And I'm not saying to be funny. This is not in a joking way saying it. I'm being very serious. And I'm gonna find out that there was a it's like a stench, like a smell coming from him, and that he was talking like, I hate to, I don't want to quote them as saying babbling, but it wasn't like directly like whatsoever. And I'm not, I'm not saying that this is fact yet, but that there was a smell, and that was another reason why he left quicker. Because it was just basically getting from bad to worse, his appearance there, and they needed to cover it up, and he just got out of there. Not because, they made it seem like he's about to attack Iran. That's why he left right away, but it had nothing to do with that. And it's not like, and I'm not saying mental health. I think it's actually some sort of he has health issues. And some other people have been telling me, if you look at his hands that have been close up to him, you see a lot of IV, what's it called? Marks, you get like
black and blue marks from IV. I don't know.
IV.
I got to be honest. I don't see it.
No, that's what I'm hearing. I'm just telling you what I'm hearing from the G7. I haven't stood next to him. I'm not saying, I know a lot of people.
I haven't seen him. I haven't seen him in a while. So, it's been about 8 years since I've actually sat next to him.
But it was interesting to hear that, though. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it is a great question as to why he actually really left so early, making it then into a G6. I mean, there's too much going on right now in the world. The reason why I say I don't believe it is today, we're watching him playing golf, back off and running, and he's speaking, to the press. It's hard to imagine, that swing of an up and down. But listen, you never know. He is 79, and 79 is not old by any stretch of the imagination. But it's certainly, an age that people do have certain issues that start to come up. I truly don't know. But I do want to ask you, in your opinion, Lev, what should people know about the Trump-Putin dynamic today? And you think it's more dangerous this term than it was the first time around?
Oh, absolutely. And Michael, I tell you honestly, this is something that I think about every day because I don't have a solution yet. Because what I'm watching and what I'm seeing happen, it's a lot deeper and more damning. A lot of people have been breaking a story. One of the stories that I broke about, wrote on my Substack, was called "Meet Sergio Gore." Who is the real Sergio Gore? We have an actual the gentleman's name is Sergio Gore, that's in the Trump put in the department. I don't know what his position is,
I'll
but
tell you
he's in
what. I'll
charge.
tell you what his position. I'll tell you what his position is.
Yeah,
He's the head of all hiring in and
correct.
for the White House.
Correct. Vetting and hiring and vetting. I mean, he's
Yes.
vetted over 4,000. I hear, New York Post. It's so funny that the New York Post, out of all the media and everything, is the only one that literally like wrote something about him. It should be front page. I mean, this should be the biggest news all over, but we hear nothing else. This guy is seriously serious. I mean, goes back to Rand Paul. His real name is Sergio Gorbachev, or I'm not sure even what his proper name, but he said that Sergio Gore. He has direct links to the Kremlin, the direct links to Russia, and the biggest part about it is he's in charge of vetting and people, but he
And
himself will
hiring.
not. Yeah, but he himself will not allow to get vetted. And we have sources I have that are telling me that he's been saying, because he's been around since 2016 in the Trump orbit and running around, and he's been saying stuff that the only person I don't report to the DOJ or the Congress. I will only report to Donald J. Trump. This is what he says. So I don't, I think that when the whole truth comes out, Michael, and I've been talking about it, and this is one thing that I think what people don't realize why it's so dangerous, that the real relationships have been being built there between people like Jared Kushner and Stephen and Witkoff, and what's his name, Kirill Dmitriev, going back to 2017. And there's been the relationship that has formed between them, and that's working, because Trump is right now more of a this is the crew that he is listening to, that's formulating these plans of attacks. And the scary part, Michael, and I'm going to tell you, is that Putin has been doing this from the day he was born, from being a KGB agent to then being the mayor of Leningrad, and then to ruling Russia for over 25 years. This he knows that world. He knows his power. He knows that's his game. It's like, it's like me going to play chess against Gary Kasparov or somebody. It would, or it's impossible. I mean, the guy does it his whole life. I don't play it. It's there's zero chance, and that's what we're watching play out. Trump and guys like Kirill Dmitriev, has been doing this his whole life, since he was born and came and was educated here. And then you got people like Jared Kushner there and Stephen Witkoff. I'm not saying they're bad people. I'm not saying, but they're there to try to make money. In their mind, they're not saving the world. They're not out there. Yes, maybe somewhere now they feel like they're Superman and but the intentions of making money. It's very easy for these people to get manipulated into these deals without even them knowing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they call that useful idiots in the spy world. That Malcolm Nance, our third host over there on our Substack live on Thursdays. But let me ask this because you brought up the whole part of money. That was actually the question I want to ask you next because you've warned us. By the way, can I just jump back in on that Sergio Gore for a second? Just imagine, right? I would imagine that if in fact that his link to the Kremlin is as identifiable as, for example, the New York Post is saying, hard for me to imagine that it wouldn't be, out there more, say by the New York Times, Associated Press, Wall Street Journal. But
Oh,
I
I think
am
they're going to
like
start.
you. I
I
am
think
like
that
you,
this.
amazed that it's the New York Post that actually put that out with Rupert Murdoch and so on. That's one dangerous, dangerous commentary.
Yeah, and I think you're gonna see some New York from the New York Times and stuff. You gotta understand. First of all, they're all scared. Look what happened when somebody stood up. Terry Moran stood up to Stephen Miller and wrote about Stephen Miller. The next day, he got fired and went on. So a lot of these journalists are scared to go after people that Trump put into these positions before that simple person because
Hmm.
there might not be a smoking gun. And see, this is what people say. Everybody, we're now so jaded that unless there's some major smell, unless we see the smoking gun itself, we don't want to believe it. But there's a thing called enough circumstantial evidence, common sense. I mean, you could start saying 1 + 1 = 2, even if you don't see the actual 1 + 1 = 2. And that's what we need to go
Right.
back to and realize that, yes, and that's why a lot of these media, they're so backed into the core because they're scared of Donald Trump, scared of the attacks of the White House, that they don't report on stuff like that, which is the real important stuff, because they're scared
Yeah.
because there's no smoking gun. There's
By the
no,
way,
you
they
know what I'm
should be
saying?
scared. And they should be scared.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, so Lev, you've warned before that Russia's game was never about politics. It's always been about money. Is this war going on right now enriching Trump's allies, even as, for example, Ukrainians and Russians are dying by the tens of thousands?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's gotten to such to degree that it's even I couldn't imagine. I don't think even you could have imagined that they're going to even take crypto to such a degree. I mean, the way that the Trump family right now is profiting from real estate, crypto projects all over the country, and God knows what. I mean, now they got a cell phone coming out. They got sneakers. They got, he's
They
selling
got
gold
Bibles,
cars,
they got guitars,
Bibles.
they
I
got they
mean,
got it all. They
they
got
got the
NFTs, they've got meme
NFTs.
coins.
Exactly. I mean, and so that alone, and that's not taken into consideration the way he plays the stock market basically for his own, because for the Lutnicks and everybody else around him that are making, I can't even imagine what, if you got the sitting US president coming out at 9:30 in the morning, putting out tweets to you, it's going to be a good day to buy today. Go buy your stocks. And all of a sudden, an hour later, he puts out a press release about tariffs and the market shoots up like a, I mean, so there, so are his, these are just simple examples of showing how, yes, he himself and his allies are making money from crypto to the stock market to all various, because he is a transactional president. I mean,
Yes.
who he had a dinner listen for the top 200 crypto guys there. You should have seen, the list of characters that were there. You could make that up.
Yeah, that you can't. So look, Lev, you're an immigrant. My wife is also from Ukraine. What goes through your mind when you see ICE storming places like Dodger Stadium, children's schools, hospitals, houses of worship to arrest undocumented families, whether it's at a baseball game or just praying to their God?
I mean, Michael, first of all, I want to say that I've never could even imagine to see this in the United States. The only places I've ever seen this was in the Soviet Union, places like that where there's communism rule, where there's authoritarian. I mean, to see, not only it's even worse than you're saying it, because it's not ICE. These are masked men. and women with no identification coming up and grabbing people off the street, not going to places to taco stands and grabbing not. I mean, and you gotta be like, if you are, you could be an American citizen, Michael, and if you fit the role, and if you don't look like American, if you might look brown or Spanish or whatever they're looking, you will get swept up. Now we have information about American citizens that are disappearing off the street, getting picked up at these, Home Depots. They're go. I mean, the thing, like you said, hospitals. They're going standing outside the house of worship. People are scared to go literally to pray on the Sundays, or because they're standing. ICE is standing around the corner, grabbing him. This is the world that we live in, and as an immigrant, I can tell you this: this country is born on immigrants. You know what I'm saying to you? We this That's what America makes America great. And again, neither you nor I, and I don't think any American, immigrant, non-immigrant, is for criminal. The portrayal that they try to portray, that they're trying to get rid of the criminal, the rapists, the drug dealers. We're all for that. But there's a right way and a wrong way for do it. We're not ready to give away our due process. We don't want to give our habeas corpus, our rights to live in a free country, because your perception that we're invaded by some imaginary force.
Yep. I mean, I agree with you. I'm all for the premise, just not the way it's being carried out. But you
Yeah.
bring up a really interesting point, and I'm thankful so far to date that there has not been anything more significant or serious that has come out. When you say that these ICE agents, they're masked, they're wearing Kevlar, they got the helmets, they got the face coverings and so on, and they yell, they claim that they're law enforcement and so on. Well, you know what? The same shit happened to the Minnesota legislator who ended up getting killed. So imagine one of these folks come to your house. Or what if hypothetically you're carrying in the street? You're one of these individuals and you're carrying because you're in a state that permits it, right? It's a free carry state. And all of a sudden, like a Texas, and all of a sudden, these guys come running at you, screaming, law enforcement, law enforcement. How do you know that they're law enforcement? You can't see their face. Why? Because they said so? Well, so did that Minnesota legislator and her husband before they got gunned down and executed. There's an apprehension and a fear that comes along. This is going to get, and I pray to God that it doesn't happen, but sadly, I do believe that more things could ultimately come, based upon this. And there's a lot of fighting going on by members of Congress right now about whether they should be allowed or should not be allowed to wear masks. Obviously, the Republicans are saying more than 500% increase in the targeting of ICE agents and their families, which is wrong. They're just doing their job. But at the same time, you have the Democratic Party turning around and saying, how is anybody supposed to know who these people really are? And I say this because I don't see this as policy. I see this whole thing, especially with ICE, with the manner for this mass deportation, as political theater. Let me ask you this, Lev. Who benefits when America's most diverse city, LA, is turned into a fear zone for immigrants?
Well, one of the reasons he's also doing it is he's right now fearful of Gavin Newsom, because right now Gavin Newsom is that Joe Biden that he was fearful in 2016. Yeah, I mean 20. Now Gavin Newsom is like, because the Democrats really, he's the one that's stepping up to him. So he definitely wants to shut him down and make and show force and show that he is. That's why, I mean, the disrespect, the way he calls him, the name calling, the lying, putting the attention and
You
the
mean
whole
you mean when he calls them new scum?
no scum, exactly. Just think about it. I mean, this is the president of the United States, and this is the crazy part. What the one thing we never talk about is, like, I I have a lot of kids, and some of them are young, and I have to constantly, like, because I, watch the news constantly to be able to, find out what's happening. It's part of our life right now. And my younger kids, like, literally sit there, and I have to sometimes tell them, like, why did the president just call the governor, isn't his name Newsom? Like, the way he's called, no, like, it's crazy. Like, the disrespect or the way he says something that, we don't even talk about, like that.
No.
This is the highest office we used to tell our kids to look up to, and now this guy's walking around insulting, calling. We have to sit there and explain to our kids, like, what is going on? Why is this allowed? Like, and then we want our kids to go out into society and be different. Well, if the president of the United States could go out there and do stuff like
Right. By the
this,
way, I wish that this would have happened when I was a kid, because I used to get in trouble for calling people names and shit when I was in like elementary school. I had a nickname for just about everybody. Right. In fact, I think when I was in Otisville, I probably gave nicknames even to people who already had nicknames. Everybody had a nickname. Everybody had one. I probably gave most of them, right? Because they're funny as shit. Some are a little snarky with a little backhanded slap, and others were actually just stuff that was so obvious. But you got to admit, Trump is fucking good at it.
yeah,
He manages to come up with, I mean, even as he disrespects his predecessor, another president, I've never seen that happen. Okay, you want to turn around and say, that he was not competent, or that I don't agree with his position on so and so. That's great. He now calls him, it's not just Sleepy Joe, it's crooked Sleepy Joe, incompetent, demented, the whole 9 yards. How do you tell your kid not to go to school and, call little Bobby or little Mary, right? A name when the president of the United States does it? You can't turn around and tell a kid not to do something the president of the United States
that's what I'm
is
saying.
doing,
You just
right? Yeah. Well, you
that's
got a
the
big
word.
job. My kids are older, so I'm feeling for you, pal.
I'm telling you, like, I sometimes don't even realize it. We'll be sitting, at the table, eating lunch or something, and the TV's on, and also he'll come out, press conference, and I'll say, guys, quiet, because I want to listen. And I'll say, he'll come out and say some crazy shit, and then I'm like, oh shit, I'm looking at my kids, now I got to explain to them, how do I get out of this one? You know what I'm saying to
Yeah,
you?
you don't. You tell them to eat their peace.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we know that Trump has secured the authority, because this was a legal case about his right to deploy and control the National Guard in Los Angeles without Gavin Newsom or the state's approval. How dangerous do you think this is as a precedent? And who gave him the playbook to even think that he could do this?
Well, I think the playbook's coming from Stephen Miller and Russell Vought. I think that's the playbook's coming from them. That they basically tell him he could do this. They give him the reasoning why he's able to do it, and we've seen it play out in live open in the Oval when Stephen
I don't
Miller.
think it's Stephen Miller, to be honest with you. I don't
Who do
mean
you
to
think? Who do you think?
interrupt you,
Who do
my
you think?
brother. Yeah,
Who do you
I don't
think it
think
is? Give me.
Stephen Miller
Oh,
at all. I don't think Stephen Miller has enough knowledge with, especially legally, to understand, what the
oh well, no,
court
no.
would.
No. The way it works, they bring up the idea, and then they have the legal attorneys are there. They're gonna. He has all yes
Yeah,
men.
but somebody in this specific case, when they were going to deploy the National Guard, I guarantee you, somebody turned around and said, "You actually have the authority to deploy the National Guard to LA, to New York, to California, to Texas, to Louisiana, to anywhere that you want, so long as it's part of national security and for the protection and the welfare of of the state. You have that right." Stephen Miller's not the guy that came up with that. I'm probably with you on Russell Vought, the designer project 2025, or maybe somebody else that's sitting in that inner circle. But this is definitely not a Stephen Miller. Now, once the issue came up, I'm certain that Trump probably said to him, Stephen, go do some research on this and get back to me immediately. And so he did, and said, you know what? I spoke to counsel, and they said, absolutely, you would have the legal right to do it. And so what does he do? He goes ahead, deploys the National Guard, tells them, Be rough. Do not be nice. And I've heard him say that many, many times over the years. Like he never understood why police officers, when they're putting a perp into the back of a patrol car, they grab the top of their head, they arch the back, they seat them in. What Trump wants to see them do is grab them by the fucking ear, smash the side of the temple on the opposite side into the corner of the door frame, because they're perps and they deserve to be treated that way. The same way that he really wanted to see these Homeland Security agents shooting people in the legs who are trying to cross into the United States.
Yeah. No, Michael, I mean, you're 100% right. I mean, he's definitely a different type of character. And I agree with you that it's probably Russell, well, because again, Stephen Miller is not the genius behind him. He's the mouthpiece that's closest to him, that basically explains to him, just like you said, just like we see it in the Oval, he explains to him that you could do this. But the real masterminds definitely is Russell. Who the other players are, it's interesting. I don't know, to tell you honestly, because who's there telling him that he's able to do, but it is definitely somebody, but it is also being pushed by people like, not only Stephen Miller, but by Susie Wiles, because he's very comfortable right now with Susie and Stephen.
Mm-hmm.
And those are
Yeah.
the two that really have his ear with him constantly, around him constantly, and are there. And as you know better than yet, because you were there during the times where those private times, the down times, where it's not everybody, where it's not that, where you're just shooting the shit, as they say it, and that's where and that's where Susie Wiles and Stephen Miller really have his ear and push those stuff, and that's why he himself even called her, said, "You're the most powerful woman in the world right now."
Yeah, he did. Let me ask you this. If Trump controls the National Guard, and if he controls the National Guard in Democratic cities like LA, what's next? Lev, you think that we're inching toward a soft civil war, or do you think we're already there?
Well, it's interesting you said that, Michael, because there was another thing that Trump broke, that nobody's talking really about, is that he is now asking for a independent counsel to look into the 2020 election because he feels it was stolen. Now, the first reaction you might think, and everybody would say, "Oh, that's crazy. Doesn't Trump is just being Trump." This is where the problem is. I think it's part of a bigger game. I think the National Guard, saying that there was, the 2020 election was stolen. The right now, Senate and Congress committees looking into Biden's auto pen, I think this is all part of a bigger plan. That because what I'm worried about, and this is what me and you keep talking about all the time with Malcolm and all of us, is to be able to get to 2026. I'm saying to you, because he's not crazy. We understand that, and people around him, they might be vicious there, but they understand that the actions that he's taking place, they watch the polls, they see the special elections, they see, they know the statistics, they understand that with the thin line already the way it is, that the chances of them losing Congress is pretty good. And you see, even if you go by poly markets or whatever, the chances look, they're skyrocketing for the Democrats to take over that. And they understand that if that happens, and when that happens, that everything that they're doing comes to a halt, because then we're going to be dealing with investigations, subpoenas, impeachments, and all kinds of stuff for all the stuff that they're doing. They understand that there's no impact, and that's what I'm worried about. And I keep saying sound alarm, is that I think that the plan, and I don't know, it's not fact, but I think my opinion is that the plan of all of these little pieces that we're watching play out is to be able to somehow either fix, stop, whatever word you want to use, but to
Mm-hmm.
stop, do something with the elections, because that's the only way he could stay in power without a civil war. You know what I'm saying to you,
Sure.
because
I
otherwise,
do.
if he could have a good enough cause to divert the elections or stop him or whatever the case is, to explain to the people, it's or control through the National Guard or whatever it is, the way it is, it gives him a chance that if he just comes out tomorrow and says, I'm not leaving office, obviously there's enough people on the other side they're going to jump up in arms and say, hell no, you're going to go.
Sure.
So I think it's part of a bigger play because just watching him, I mean, and better than anybody watching him. He's a guy that watches the polls, he watches the stock market, he watches all of these things, he watches the commentaries.
Oh yeah.
He wants to hear. He wants to know, especially how, and he's watching. I mean, his polls are down, the commentary's bad. I mean, there's nowhere where he is winning, 100 on every subject. I mean, it's like, from the tariffs to the, his fighting infight. I mean, even take a look at the infighting. I mean, people forgot Elon Musk, that's a done deal. You know it and I know. Just because they pretended to say they made peace, behind the scenes, Elon Musk is actually going after some of these, like this guy, Sergey Gore that we reported on, or Gorbachev. Elon Musk even went on Twitter and called him a snake. So Elon Musk is out of the
Yep.
circus. You got Tucker Carlson, and Tucker Carlson always hated Trump. We remember to the text messages back in the day when he called him a problem. But now it's again coming out, and he embarrassed Ted Cruz, went after Ted Cruz. You got Steve Bannon trying to make peace going
Boy, did he
into
ever
the White
take him apart.
Yeah, you saw that. That was incredible.
Yeah. I did. Hey, Lev, let me ask you a
Yeah.
question. Let me ask you this question. Do you have an issue with Biden's auto pen? You think Trump's got something there? Here's the funny thing. There was a book, I remember reading it when I was in prison in Otisville, called Five Felonies a Day. Harvey Westgate, if I'm not mistaken, was the author. And in it, it basically says that every single person in America commits 5 felonies a day. That's sort of the general premise. What if hypothetically he's right? That at the very end, Biden wasn't doing shit. That there were times that he was completely disassociated from the ability of the office and these guys that were in his inner circle, because I have no regard for any of them, that they were using the auto pen. In fact, and it was reported, we had sent a letter to the Oval Office in regard, myself, Jesse Jackson Jr., and a couple of other people, talking about doing a mass pardon for all felons who have done their time. Being a felon, you're not supposed to be a felon for life, right? That's not what the judge. That's not what the judge ruled. Right, only in America. The judge rules that if you do 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever the sentence may be. But when you finish it, why do you remain a felon for life? It's just a stigma that interferes with your ability to exist and your family's ability. So that was there. But the argument that Jesse and I were making is that we don't even think that these animals that were around Biden, those protective animals, that they even discussed our pardon application with them. And I worked on my pardon application for like 5 months. I wanted at least to be considered. It wasn't even considered. And so I do have an issue with the auto pen. I just, of course, unlike Trump, I don't think it needs to be taken to the extent that Trump is taking, which is that every single policy that Biden signed needs to be repealed.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you, and I would love to go into a lot of it. The problem is that actually right now I'm in the middle because of my relationship with the Bidens, Hunter Biden, and the Biden family in the last year and a half of his administration. I'm hearing, and my lawyers are telling me that I might be subpoenaed probably to this whole fiasco that James Comer and they're having the oversight committee. So because of that, I can't comment on my knowledge of what transpired during that time frame. yet, but obviously, if I am subpoenaed, the one thing I will is tell the truth. Whatever I do know, whatever I was privy to, and after that, we could definitely do our show and go
There you
into
go.
it, and more likely to go into it. But
There
right
you
now,
go.
I just
So,
can't.
so Lev, look, the hour goes by, as I said at the beginning, very, very quickly, unfortunately. One last question for you. I want to cut through the bullshit, cut through all the spin. With everything that you've seen, you, Lev Parnas, everything that you've seen, Ukraine, Iran, India, Pakistan, Israel, Hamas, ICE, the courts, what do you think's Trump's end game? Is he trying to consolidate power? Or do you think he just wants to burn the whole fucking thing down on his way out?
No, I don't think I think he wants to consolidate power. I think he wants to make a shitload of money. I think he wants to be able to leave a legacy. He wants his, I think he really, better, but I think he wants his face on Mount Rush, on Mount Rushmore. I think he wants to be considered in history as well. I think in his crazy mind. And I think the only way he could possibly attain that is if they control power long enough to rewrite history, to rewrite the truth, to because if in 4 years the new administration comes in, all this bull and garbage he's doing will change in a heartbeat. The only way he could go down in history as somebody great is if he could maintain this craziness for 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, whatever, a long enough time where it becomes installed in our history as part of what we go on.
Wow.
And to do that, you have to be able to consolidate power. So I think that's what he really wants. I think, and that's why he's trying to, and that's why I don't think it's even about who's going to be the next one that's in power. If it's him, if people say Don Jr. or if it's going to be J.D. Vance or it's going to be some. I don't think it's even an issue about that. I think he's trying to consolidate that it's his legacy. Whoever is going to take over is going to have to continue like his legacy of whatever he's trying to do.
Wow. Well, Lev, thanks so much for joining us here on Mea Culpa. Lots to be looking for from Ukraine all the way to Iran. Thanks for
Always.
joining me, my brother.
Thanks for
Great to
having
see
me,
you.
Mike.
And to all the folks, Lev's Substack, fantastic. Lev and I and Malcolm Nance, again, have our Substack live called Unleashed every Thursday. So please make sure that you check it out. Join us. Follow us on Substack. And again, Lev, I'll be seeing you, my brother, very, very soon.
Absolutely, my brother. Thank you for having me. Take care, guys.
You got it.